Hello, I'm Dave from DinoPC, and today we're fishing at the bottom of the barrel. So today at DinoPC, we're making a list of the top 5 worst pieces of tech that we think have ever existed. We're going to use examples from stuff that we've used to stuff that we just don't need to use because we know it's that bad. So, without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 5 and, well, number 4, we actually have an operating system. And in this case, we're going to go with number 5 first, obviously, and it's Windows Vista. Windows Vista. Where do we start? A foray into one of the worst operating systems and worst received operating systems ever made. But you guys may not know why. So let me explain. First off, Windows Vista followed XP. Microsoft had gotten Windows XP to the point where it was virtually worthless code could still function without affecting any other users or systems. XP was kind of perfect for the time. Very easy to run, and of course, it looked kind of cool too. Much different from the old look of Windows 2000 anyway. There were significant security issues which were affecting Vista. The thing would keep asking you if, are you sure, over and over again. So users would eventually give up reading any of the boxes and just tick things automatically. Even worse, the user account control grabbed full control of the computer and forced it to interact with it. And that's just the start. Poor optimization is an understatement, with users reporting anything from a 10 to a whopping 30% performance hit over XP. And no wonder XP is still being supported by businesses today. Vista would also intermittently and randomly access your hard drive. This was a bigger deal back then because not everybody used a boot SSD, and to randomly hear a whirring whirl of derbish coming from your PC is quite alarming. But what's more alarming is, if I'm not doing anything on my PC, Vista, why were you accessing my hard drive? What are you looking for? Tell me. Also, as Vista was announced, they announced that they're going to stop selling XP entirely almost straight away, which meant that users couldn't stick with XP, which of course is known to be a relying operating system and of course was at the time very, very well received. So that was everything wrong with Windows Vista. Well, I say everything. There's a bigger list. I just pointed out the things that I found most frustrating about it. But that is nothing nearly as frustrating as number 4. In the year 2000, Windows decided to release the vastly incredible Windows 2000. And the same year, they also decided to release the vastly worst operating system that could possibly be conceived. Windows Millennium Edition. The list is so long on the things that are wrong with this, I'm going to cherry pick. And you guys are going to very, very soon get like an understanding of why it's so terrible. Let's just take the uninstaller, for example. The uninstaller essentially uninstalls the previous version of whatever operating system you had, and then decides to install Windows Millennium Edition. On Windows Millennium Edition, it wouldn't uninstall 100% of the software, leaving some epic junk code, and would cause Explorer to be unusable in some cases. Back in the day, this wasn't so bad, as most software came on disks and you could purchase a browser on a disk, but still, this is kind of ridiculous, really. Second, it was built on Windows DOS. Well, I say it was built on DOS. It was built on DOS 4.0. And for those of you who know anything, DOS 4.0 is, again, an absolutely awful operating system. 3.3 was the DOS that was super reliable. 4.0 would have program crashes and system errors, and some apps wouldn't even just open. Of course, they weren't called apps back then, they were called programs. But still, this might have been the reason why Windows Millennium Edition would almost refuse to stay stable and run programs, even on the beastliest of hardware. The recommended specs had a massive 64 megabytes of RAM. People were finding problems on computers with well over twice that, and back in the day, that amount of RAM would cost you an arm and a leg. Not to mention you'd have to buy a motherboard that would fit all the RAM, and then of course you couldn't go over the 512 megabyte limit anyway, so it terrible. It's the fact that it was entirely poorly optimized. Something that wasn't really needed, as Windows 2000 was released the same year and it was brilliant and stable. So that is Windows Millennium Edition. So 2 operating systems. Who would have thought it? Both from Microsoft. We could have also, I guess, in terms of operating systems, mentioned Winix, which is a Linux-based program that would run Windows, who then Windows tried to sue Linux, and then the Windows programs wouldn't work properly on Linux, and that, yeah, we could have mentioned that also, but I felt that Windows Vista and Windows Millennium Edition are far worse culprits. At least Linux was trying to do something different. So coming in at number 3, we have the Sony NWHD1 audio player.
No.
In 2004, Sony was so obsessed with its A-Track 3 format that they released a network Walkman that didn't offer MP3, WAV or WMA. Instead, the NWHD1 had to use Sony software to convert their current music files to the A-Track 3 format, transfer them to their music player, and, well, actually, Silas owned one, so he can tell you the other stuff that's wrong.
So yeah, I actually bought one of these devices. At the time, it was a debate between essentially the Ipod Mini, which a lot of my friends were going for, and this Sony MP3 player as an alternative, basically. I went for it because it offered apparently sort of better capacity options. I didn't really understand any of the sort of formatting issues that were happening with the actual MP3s themselves. The clunky software was a big issue. The fact that you had to have it installed on any computer you wanted to add music to, you couldn't drag and drop. That all sort of locked it into the same element as like an iPhone would, where you have iTunes and you have to have iTunes to add music to it. The biggest problem with this MP3 player was in its proprietary connection that was required in order to actually transfer music and to charge the thing up, which wasn't attached to the actual MP3 player itself. It was a small separate sort of receiver that then you plugged a USB cable or a power cable into. If you lost this, you couldn't add any music to the MP3 player or recharge it. At the time, I did lose it for a short period of time, maybe about a week or so, and actually ended up finding it. And I was on the brink of spending almost like 60, 70 pounds on somebody's second-hand one on eBay, just because you couldn't use the MP3 player without this little tiny plastic box. Seemingly so, after about a year or so, the thing broke. That's nothing really negative about the product itself. It was unfortunate. These things happen, and there was warranty, but by that point I was sick of it, couldn't get a refund, and actually ended up moving over to an iPod, that being the kind of most popular MP3 player at the time. Yeah, oh no, okay. The looks weren't really such a big issue. It was more the user interface. Again, at the time, iPods had come out with its kind of click wheel, and all of that was fantastic for navigating through large sort of bodies of music. The Sony option actually had still very big capacity, so at the time you could chuck a load of music onto it, but there was no good way of navigating through this music. There was a little wheel that you could click up and click down through tracks, but then if you had like 400 tracks in a list, you had to manually click through one by one, which was horrific, and at the time really badly thought through when you look at something like the iPod and you realize how revolutionary that kind of control method was at the time. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, okay.
So, we get on to number 2, the Apple Pippin.
My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
What is the Apple Pippin? You may never have heard of it. Well, it was released in 1996. And it was god-awful. Now, I know you guys watching this are probably PC fans, and so Apple's Pippin may not mean anything to you. But basically, it was the Xbox One of the 90s era. It was an entertainment system. It wasn't designed just for games. It was designed for educational purposes as well. This meant that it's not entirely geared towards children or the younger audiences, which in the 1990s was basically what all video games consoles were pretty much geared towards. The Sony had a little bit more of an adult theme, the Nintendo was geared towards children, and to be honest, there was no adult gamers like there are today. Most of all, about 90% of the people were children who were gaming, and those who were adults were gaming on PCs. Launched in 1996, this was one of the biggest flops of all time. 100,000 units of the Apple Pippin was made. They sold 40,000. The problem was timing, as well as branding. They decided to brand it as Apple normally do, in whispers and hushes and telling everybody how brilliant it is. But unfortunately, that's not what kids want. Kids don't want whispers and hushes. They want explosions and dollar bills and shooty guns and MLG quickscopes. And unfortunately, the Apple Pippin didn't come with any of this. But Nintendo had the flagships, Zelda, Mario. Even in recent times, Splatoon being a massive hit, they still just keep chugging out the great IPs, as well as keeping on their old stuff. And Nintendo 64 was successful because they had the flagships. Meanwhile, the Sony PlayStation 1 was geared with games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Grand Theft Auto, and Tekken. These games were for a more mature audience, and they were brilliant. So where did the Apple Pippin fit in? Well, it kind of didn't. The third parties didn't really jump on board, and their confusing marketing meant that the educational bit was highly emphasized, and, well, I was a kid. I learned at school. Who wants to come home and play on an educational machine? No one. It had the same problem as the Xbox One did recently. It tried to be a multimedia device in an age where people just want a gaming console. If you want a multimedia device, you buy a gaming PC. And finally, we come to the ultimate flop. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this coming already. This is the Nokia N-Gage.
You couldn't win this competition if you were the only person in it in a million years. That's how bad it was.
At least it was famous for something, right? Like, for all the wrong reasons. The problem with the N-Gage is that it wasn't a very good phone. And it wasn't a very good games console, really. All the games that it had were ports from the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2. They had Rayman 3, which was actually a port of Rayman 1 to the N-Gage, and then they had Tomb Raider, which was a port of the PlayStation 1 version to the N-Gage, and they had one very good game, but was so confusing most people didn't give it a chance, and that was the Elder Scrolls game. Other than that, a bunch of poorly optimized games did appear on it, but that wasn't its major problem. No, the major problem of it was its cost. At a launch price of $399, it soon dipped, and I mean really dipped, losing the company money as if the console was like strapped to the entire Olympic weightlifting team and dropped off a building. Seriously. Nokia said that they had sold 400,000 units, while an independent adjudicator claimed that they only sold 4,000 units in America and 800 units in the UK. Not great when you considered they made over 400,000 of the things. It also didn't die. The N-Gage platform was released in 2003, and it wasn't until September 2009 that they said that they were going to stop supporting it. And well, they actually made a second N-Gage. After the second N-Gage, they didn't stop there, they decided to incorporate it into some more of their phones, like this one, for example. The N-Gage brand wasn't like Nintendo, which is what I imagine they will be kind of hoping for. It wasn't becoming a staple of gaming excellence, rather a gaming joke. While some of the games were critically received, like Tomb Raider, Rayman, and Elder Scrolls, they would be. They were already released. Well, not the Elder Scrolls, that was actually made uniquely for the N-Gage. And, well, it was still very hard to get to grips with, and it wasn't something that you could just sort of sit there and start playing. It's something you'd sit there and play for hours on end, rather than playing while you travel. And unfortunately, the point of a portable console / phone is that it's easy to pick up and play. Another reason that N-Gage died is that Nintendo just couldn't be stopped in the handheld gaming market with the Game Boy Advance SP, and then the DS came out with a very clever marketing campaign geared towards adults. Anyway guys, that is our top 5 worst pieces of tech ever. What do you think? What is your list? Let us know in the comments section below. Is there a piece of tech that you have used yourself which you think this could possibly be the worst thing I've ever bought? Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more videos like this, then leave a like and we will make another top 5 next week. If you didn't enjoy it, then please leave a dislike, but let us know why in the comment section below. And we'll see you next time for the outro.